G'day, I'm Trev, a proud son of a Vietnam veteran. Dr. Ken O'Brien has spent the last 35 years researching and developing a therapeutic model for practitioners to assist those who suffer from PTSD. Dr. Ken is joining us from Central Queensland here in Australia. Good evening, Ken. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, how you going, Trev?
I'm doing fantastic, mate. See that we've got our same hats on today, which is fantastic.
Oh,
look at that.
Yep.
That's beautiful. Now, before we get into your whole history of like your 35 years of studying intergenerational PTSD, I just want to know a little bit about your background, especially you to introduce your father. Tell me a little bit about Richard.
He goes by Rick. Rick is a Vietnam veteran. He served in 1 RAR in 6th Platoon Bravo Company. I'm pretty sure it was 68, 67, 68, he went over to Vietnam. The reason I say pretty sure is because he doesn't talk much about it. He never did. And that's, I think, a very common experience amongst our fraternity or our population, that our fathers were a little bit absent when it came to giving us details. And I understand a lot of the reasons behind that. But anyway, my dad, he also spent some time with the 173rd Airborne over there in America, which is why he gets to wear the maroon blazer or jacket when he goes to commemorative occasions. So, and he's very proud of that link with the Americans, very proud of it indeed. And he's very proud of his service and the fact that his children and grandchildren respect that service. He is one of those men that he can really enjoy the sound of children laughing and playing. And he says that he likes to listen to that because it reminds him of why he went to Vietnam. He ignores what he hears on television and mainstream media because they don't understand, or they demonstrate quite clearly that they lack the understanding. So when he hears children being free and not afraid and laughing and fully living their lives, he says to himself, that's why I did it. So my dad's a very passionate man about service, very passionate about his experiences, but he's also a very quiet man. He finds it difficult to talk about his experiences. That can also be a generational thing. But of course, having a military service and the experiences and memories that he has adds to that generational thing. And it makes it a unique experience growing up as a child of a Vietnam veteran that's got PTSD and a few other things from his service. But also when you're the son, because we're meant to be men and our role models are absent during critical years of our emotional development, where we're meant to master our stress and our response to emotional dysregulations and things. So often we stumble through life not having that guide for us, and we make a few mistakes along the way. Some of us make big mistakes, some of us make very little mistakes, but we don't have those role models. And I'm not saying that's any different from, say, somebody who had their child, their father went to prison, or their father got very, very sick and wasn't able to communicate. But with us, our dads were physically there, but not emotionally. Yeah, my father is a very proud man. He's very proud of what he's done. And only recently I found out, really, honestly, genuinely found out that he's very proud of me.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I know, but to wait this long, it's like, geez, couldn't you tell me a bit earlier? But hey, I know. And he's found the words to say it.
Oh, that's
and
great.
That's huge. That's huge.
I mean, it's like a lot of us COVVs growing up that we do have a hard time. Our dads don't open up emotionally and tell the real feelings. Normally you hear it through friends, or, some friends will come around and they say, man, your dad keeps bragging about how great you've been going, but it doesn't come, directly from your dad. So is there any situations that you can remember growing up, like, that you may have felt different from some of your friends and think, well, hang on, my dad acts this way, but maybe your friends' parents are slightly different?
Yes, yeah. This hit me like a bolt out of the blues when I was doing my doing the second second research PhD was the mundane activities. My amazing supervisors, Dr. Robin Price and Dr. Barbara Adkins at QUT, they said, what about the mundane daily activities that most people take for granted that you consider normal as well? Because they wanted me to explore the differences between perceptions of normality in the family home. And I go, all right, what about washing the dishes? That's always different. I know that when I go over to my mates' places when I was a teenager, they didn't have a routine, a system. In my family home, we grew up with, well, when you finish your dinner, it's scrape, rinse, stack.
Yeah.
You scrape scrape, rinse, stack.
Yeah.
And my kids are being raised with that too. I mean, if my daughter and son were watching this right now, they go, yes, we know that system.
I mean,
Dad,
is there
drill
any
that
other
into-
way of doing it? That's what you're supposed to do.
That's right. It's normal for us, but it's not normal in other families that don't have a history of defense or even first responder, or I think PTSD. Because it's all about operational efficiency and the minimalistic use of resources.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If you're out in the field and you've got a water bottle, and that one water bottle, which is 1 litre of water, you've got to brush your teeth with it. You've got to use it to drink throughout the day. Wash your hands, dampen your hair down. If it's a hot day, put a bit on your face. You've got a lot to do with 1 litre of water. And sometimes you're given 2 litres of water. Well, that doesn't mean you can splurge. It means you've got to be, that's meant to be only for drinking. So we're taught very early, and I think that's embedded within us through our parents and through parenting strategies, how to optimize the resources that we have to get the most out of what's available. I can remember Dad straightening nails out to reuse them. He'd pull them out of an old plank, straighten them out so he could reuse them. Whereas I went and helped another mate of mine who was just, he was a builder, and he said, why do that? Just go and get a whole bunch of new ones. Throw the old ones away.
Yeah,
and
it's
I couldn't.
Making the most of what you've got, isn't it? I mean, they had to do that when they were out in the bush, and they couldn't just like go to Bunnings or do whatever. They had to improvise with what they've got there. The real MacGyvers of this world, I say.
You've got it. You've got it.
So
which kind of puts us at an advantage of people that don't have this common background, that we are MacGyvers. We find ways around the problems.
Yeah, so true. I mean, you touched briefly about PTSD. So was that a big trigger within your family? I mean, you said that your dad had some side effects of that coming back from the war, and then most likely yourself, but anyone else in your family? And if so, did you seek out any help, and was that any beneficial before you started to study that yourself, which we'll touch on a bit later?
Nobody I'm aware of except myself. I've got the post-traumatic stress disorder as well. And that's a complicated story and a webinar in itself behind that. But I never realized my dad had something called PTSD. Because I was born into the family. I grew up with it. PTSD was like the little friend that sat on my dad's shoulder and dictated how he was going to react and respond. And I never knew my life as any different. Christmas was often a contrast between the civilian world and the military world. I remember having 2 Christmas parties. One where the Green family, we all turned up in khakis and Santa Claus popped his head out of an APC or a tank or abseiled out of a helicopter, a green helicopter. We're surrounded by weapons of war at a time of peace. So you learn to live with contradiction. You learn to live in harmony with the visual and the symbolic conflict. And that in itself, while ironic, is an advanced survival trait, that we can make sense of things that don't make sense.
Can you just explain to us and to the other COVVs watching out there in this wonderful world of technology of what your findings are and what you've found, and how can that relate to us to probably try to understand where our dads are at from coming back from war, and also help us to understand who we are just that little bit better?
What I found, I guess, a lot of the information I have is collected and collaborated from a variety of different sources. For example, I didn't conduct the actual the genome experiment, the original genome experiment, the human genome experiment the United States Department of Health did back in 2000. But from that, I elicited a lot of the data around that and identified candidate genes where qualities, where emotions are dysregulated and difficult to manage, have got genetic links or links within candidate DNA and gene segments to post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, PTSD is not one genomic quality. It's not like brown hair or two ears, where there is an actual genomic sequence of base letters or amino acids that are like ingredients to make brown hair. Brown curly hair, for example.
Are you meaning like anxiety and depression and stuff like that makes up the ingredients of PTSD?
Yes. So we're looking at many different genes with many different gene segments. It's what's known as a polygenomic condition. Now, as you're aware with the snowball effect, if you affect one gene, it's going to have an impact on other genes. If you imagine it like a hallway, you've got your finger on a switch, the on button, and you're in a hallway where it's a very long hallway. It's dark because every light is off, but at regular intervals, like every 2 feet along the ceiling of that hallway, there is a fluorescent light. But beside each fluorescent light, or in the gap between the bulbs, there is a light sensor. And that light-dependent sensor will only turn on when a specific amount of light is registered by the sensor, and then it turns the light on right beside it. But the thing is, up until recently with technology, we've never known how much light is needed to turn received by that sensor to turn that light on. And there's no known sequence. I could flick the switch. Now, this is epigenetics. If I put enough pressure or stress on that switch, now when you put your finger on a button, you can touch it and nothing will happen. You have to keep applying pressure, and then eventually there's a no return part where you reach a point and there's no stopping it from switching on. There's like a threshold of pressure, and that switch turns on. Well, our genes operate much the same way. You can put up with a certain amount of pressure or influence from the environment until that switch gets turned on. Now, I'll segue back to PTSD about this, or a traumatic event in the individual's environment. Right? That switch gets turned on, and it might be the 200th bulb down that corridor that turns on. And then that might turn on the light that's only 5th from you, but none of the others will turn on, because the 5th light is ultra sensitive, the sensor to that light's ultra sensitive. So we don't know how much of stressors are required to turn on the gene that's involved in the polygenomic response for PTSD. All we know is that once you hit one switch, a whole series of them start to happen. And if you do that repeatedly, like as in compound or complex PTSD or compound PTSD, more lights come on. And then depending on the severity or the intensity of the experience, a lot more lights come on. So the more significant the trauma, the more catastrophic the genomic response is going to be.
And it's easy to have these lights turn on, but to turn them off is the hardest part.
Very. That's right. That's the hardest part, and it can take multiple generations to do that. But it takes one event to push that switch over the threshold, past the no returns part where it turns on. Turning it off, that's the hard part.
So the biggest question that a lot of people are going to have out there, which is going through my head at the moment, like we have these switches that you say that have been turned on. How or what process do we need to partake to start the process of turning those switches off. Can one person do it to then affect the multiple generations past them, or does it take more generations to do? Am I making myself clear? It's a
yes. Yeah. There is debate. There's some debate in the medical world at the moment. Pharmaceutical models are trying to say that there's a tablet that dumbs the brain down in that area, that it can curb remorse, and it can not rewire the brain, but just silence that active part of the brain. There's other models that talk about invasive surgery that can switch that part of the brain off as well. But those are very expensive and risky procedures. What can possibly be the most effective long-term strategy is management via understanding. So if we can understand how to live in a under brighter lights, and optimize or make the best of our situation by understanding what the qualities of PTSD are, what are the symptoms and qualities that make it up, we can say, well, okay, for example, hypervigilance is one of those qualities. It's very typical, and it's one of the problematic ones that most of us complain about. We're hypervigilant, we're on edge, we're anxious in social situations around crowds and people. Okay, all right. Well, a lot of people are medicated and can't work because they got to get out in public. Well, I was an employment consultant once for people with disabilities, and I was able to find somebody with significant social phobia as a byproduct of PTSD work. And that person was a young veteran. He couldn't go to, for example, the Indooroopilly shopping centre was the most fearful place for him. On a Saturday morning, I understand that. It's got kids, it's got people, it's got noise, it's got too much. And he could not possibly. So he developed the secondary thing called agoraphobia. Eventually, he didn't leave his house. He was just too scared to leave. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody at the Indooroopilly shopping centre. So the disabling situation is not in his head. The disabling situation isn't the veteran, because the bricks and mortar of the Indooroopilly shopping centre are exactly the same at 2 o'clock in the morning as they are at 10 o'clock in the morning. So the disabling environment is not the shopping centre, it is the crowd. It is the people and the noise.
So you're trying to find some way to work around the other elements that you can't change, but look at the ones that you can change.
You've got it. That's good. It's what you focus on what people can do rather than what they cannot.
Right.
And this flips the medical paradigm upside down. It looks more along the lines of, okay, what is this condition and what can be done with it? Let's look at the environments that triggers the stressors. How do I remove the triggers by changing the environment? And the same with us, Trevor. The same with us. When we're growing up, we're going through school, university, work, marriage, children. What are the triggers that activate these problematic or challenging behaviours? And how do we re-engineer the environment so that those triggers are not as severe or don't exist at all? And part of that environment, believe it or not, is how we think about the things. What thought processes do we have? How can we actually engineer a process within us where we readdress our role in that process? What do we bring to it? As I've already said, that we've got unique ways of looking at the world that are simply misunderstood. So why don't we teach these people how we add value to our environments?
And there's the old thing, whenever you bring up Vietnam War, you always hear two little letters that come out, is AO, Agent Orange. I'd be interested to know, has that had any effect on your life or your children's life from if your dad was exposed? And what do you know about Agent Orange so far, how it can affect multiple generations possibly?
Well, one of the side effects of studying Vietnam veterans' families is, of course, you're also going to be exposed to the population or the percentage of Vietnam veterans' children that are experiencing the effects of the toxic impacts of Agent Orange. But let me be clear, it's not just one agent. It's not just 2,4,5-T. There were actually two Agent Oranges. Agent Orange 1 and Agent Orange 2. One of the drums had a single orange band. The other had two orange bands. But there were also purple, white, blue, green. They were known as the Devil's Rainbow. And I was very, very Williams, Joyce Williams, I think. Yeah, I was very, very fortunate to meet the lady that wrote the book, The Devil's Rainbow, and I heard her life story. And Jean Williams, yes, not Joyce, Jean Williams. Thank you. And I got to meet her before she unfortunately passed, and her story, and it was an amazing story, absolutely amazing. What she did, why she did it. And of course, how she did it. But I myself, my father was sprayed, although it's, never on official records. But in Vietnam, being hot and muggy, and Australian men being pretty, rugged and sometimes, what do they say, thick in the arms and thick in the head, that they took their shirts off when it started to rain, and they were almost always under thick foliage that had recently been sprayed, although
so it's dripping down on them.
Yes. Now, not only is it dripping down on them and they're absorbing it through their skin, but they brushed their teeth with it. They boiled their rice with it, so the rice soaked it up. They cooked, they washed in it, they bathed in it, and they drank it. So they were pretty much inundated with it. And as Jean Williams in her book also shows that the company that made the Agent Orange recommended that it be diluted to a particular ratio, but that was ignored by the powers that be in the military, and they made it far stronger than it should have been. So when our soldiers are bathing in it, brushing their teeth and drinking it, they're getting it at a far higher rate. Much, much more intense. So the mutagenic effects were far more significant and severe, and we're still seeing that in great-grandchildren of veterans, or the Vietnam soldiers being born in Vietnam today.
Yeah,
they just get it from the soil. They eat food that was grown in that soil that's been laced with that toxic carcinogenic chemical. Me, I don't think I have anything physical that can be attributed to my father's exposure. My son, he has spina bifida. And the ADF and the DVA websites and their medical people have already declared that cleft palate and spina bifida are one of the two primary byproducts of that in the next generation, but they don't look at grandchildren. They don't give any acknowledgement for the fact that it's multi-generational. If I had spina bifida, I would have been recognised and probably given some sort of support. But my son doesn't get anything because they have not acknowledged that it is multi-generational, that a mutation can be passed on down through generations.
Back in 2009, you had a conference up and going. Can you tell us what happened there and what was the conference all about?
Oh, look, I was just getting back at university a little bit, and I was very, very lucky to be taken under the wing by a fellow with a rather innocuous name called John Smith. That really is his name. But John was the president of the RSL club near me, and when I fronted up and mentioned my dad's name, he says, "I know your father." And, oh, right, okay. So he took me under his wing, gave me an office, and said, "Please, here's a computer, here's some stationery, here's a chair and a table. We'd love you to do your research here, but in return, we want you to help our members and their families." So for the next 4 years, I worked as a volunteer at that RSL, representing not just RSL, but also the Vietnam Veterans Association of Queensland. I became an advocate. I became a welfare officer. I became a spokesperson. John got me in front of politicians, solicitors, presidents. I became the one of the regional delegates, so I wound up going to national conferences, and he gave me the opportunity as a younger generational veteran and son of a Vietnam veteran and father of children with the multi-genetic impacts of dioxin exposure in Vietnam to stand up and not hold them accountable, but to hold the flag up for us, so that together as a unified big family, we can hold the decision makers accountable and to inform them of the struggles we're having. So getting back to it, this first conference was the children and grandchildren of Vietnam veterans, to try and illuminate that multi-generational genetic impacts of of not just Agent Orange, but also the emotional traumas of Vietnam, that they can be passed on. So the first international convention was held there, and there were people from all around Australia came, and those that couldn't make it, it was live streamed around the world. And back in 2009, the technology was a little rudimentary, but we got it happening, and it stirred up quite an interest in the States. Now, in the top, can I refer to the photos?
Yeah, 100%, mate.
Look, I want to say that in the top left picture there's myself, and there's Nina, and Nina's an active member of this group as well. I want to give credit to her. Without her, in the blue top there, a lot of this could never have happened. I could not be sitting here with doctor in front of my name without her. I reach out and give a big thanks to her. She was always there as well. She supported this. She understood it. She may not have lived it directly herself, but boy, she understood it and she supported it. The fellow sitting down there, that's Dave. He also, Dave is in a wheelchair. He has spina bifida. Again, he supported it. He is not from a military family directly, but he certainly understands what it's like being related to somebody, and he was a big, and still is today, a very big supporter and a close friend. The photo in the middle, well, those are people that supported me. The one on the left is a Navy veteran. The one on the right is also a daughter of a Vietnam veteran, and me in the middle. And of course, that was the photo that was in the paper. It's found on the internet today. That's where I got that from. And I think that was Pine River's Press promoting the convention, plus the support and welfare groups that we were trying to get to just to call people together to say we understand. The one on the right, that was my Courier Mail briefing, talking about the study I'm doing. The one down the bottom on the left, that's actually a more recent photo. That wasn't the convention. That was a talk to the Queensland public health system on youth and youth mental and mind matters. Yeah. And I'm talking about PTSD and its heritability there. And of course, the one in the middle is just yours truly, my design. I'm not a desktop publisher. I don't have any skills whatsoever, but that's what I designed for the convention. And it went global. And again, America was a huge taker. It took this up. Like a hungry dog. It loved this information and what we were doing.
So that was back in 2009. Do you see a lot of change? Has it gone forward or has it stagnated? And do you think that it's something that we should be looking at doing again, making a big international conference to start talking about this all over?
Well, there has been a lot of change, a great deal of change. And in fact, in 2017, I was invited to go over to America to attend their first ever convention for their children of Vietnam veterans or children of Agent Orange. And it was a once in a lifetime experience. It was amazing. At the convention I organized, it was interesting that people who had never met each other within 30 seconds were crying on each other's shoulders saying, it feels like I grew up under the same roof as you, but I've never met you. And the same sentiment was shared in America. Even across the pond, there were people that felt like we knew each other, that we understood each other. The guy over to the far left, in that far left photo, not the one with the hat, But see the bloke with the limbs missing?
Yep.
That is the amazing and incredible Josh Kelly.
Oh, yes,
He,
Josh, he's reached out to us. It's
yep,
been looking forward to catching up with that man.
bloody good bloke.
Yeah.
And he really appreciates the Aussie sense of humour too. Now, and again, he was born with these with the Agent Orange impacts, but he has really made the most of his life. He is an inspiration. He is an absolute inspiration.
What services do you see that are probably lacking out there in the marketplace, especially for us, the children of Vietnam veterans? Is there anything that you see that we need to start making a little bit more noise about?
Look, I'm going to let a secret out because I'm trying to. This is something I'm establishing a business in. I've got the business plan to deliver all this. It's just a matter of timing right now, but I want to be able to provide supports to employers and employment support agencies, particularly those in the disability sector, so that, again, we can reframe the context in which our disabilities or our challenges exist, that we can help employers and employment agencies create environments and situations where our qualities are valued rather than ostracized and demonized, where we add value, not just to a workplace, but to the culture of that workplace. And at the bottom line, if you've got somebody who's hyper vigilant in the workplace, they're going to see things before other people do, such as accidents. So somebody with PTSD or somebody that's been raised in a military family becomes a workplace health and safety officer. Or they've got acute attention to detail, which means that in accounting, they would pick up things that couldn't be, they'll see something that other people will miss, which also means that in security, like the airport, that bloke or the person that sits down at the X-ray machine, he might pick up something that other people won't see. And you know what? I'm hoping that the person that scans all the bags that goes on the airplane that I'm going to be on has PTSD and sees these things. Makes me feel safer before getting onto that airplane. It also means, now that's just employment. Now, when you work with the employers, I want to tell them how to improve their bottom line and their profit margin by streamlining processes. Because remember, as I said, when we grow up, when we're washing the dishes, it's about optimization of available resources. It's bred into us. It's hardwired. So if we can help our boss to save money and make money, we become valuable. And it's something that's just a part of who we are and the way we were raised. I'd also like to help educate the medical practitioner field, that these people know more about their conditions than you do, because there's no textbook on how they were raised, not yet. And not just that, but they've already explored every available option to optimize their situation. They're coming to you because they're pretty much utilized every opportunity they can, everything they can. They've exhausted all their options. The same when it comes to mental health. You know, I got a phone call from somebody who had just rung LifeLine. This was on December 24th, 2011. I remember that day really well. And he rang me up and said, I just got off LifeLine and they said they can't help me. I said, can't help you with what? He says, I've got a gun. I'm about to pull the trigger. Turned out he was the son of a Vietnam veteran. Well, turned him around, stopped him from pulling the trigger. Because when I shared with him, which, you know, we're taught that practitioners are not meant to share our personal life, but I had to build trust very rapidly with him. Yeah. And I said, I know exactly what you mean. And he goes, how could you? You're a textbook warrior. What would you know? I said, I'm more than just a textbook warrior, mate. I said, my dad served in what I've told you guys already. And he goes, and there was silence and he was crying. So that was, I guess it slammed it home for me when it was real and alive. And what I want to do and what I think needs to be done is schools, employers, employment support agencies, mental health supports, all health supports, be aware of what our qualities are. Be aware that we are the experts in our situation. Be aware that our biggest problem is not being understood. My mum picked up the pieces of my dad, put him back together, glued him back as best she could. And that photo demonstrates her success that she's done. That my son there with his spina bifida is looking at his pop going, "What's that medal for, Pop?" And my father giving him the education. Wow. That's, yeah.
It's just priceless, mate. Absolutely priceless.
And he respects and honours his military heritage, as those other photos show. So does my daughter. I also want to acknowledge the women that served in Vietnam too. You know, we must acknowledge them, because when they came back, they weren't given a welcome home parade. They weren't given the march through the streets. They weren't acknowledged. They had to go home and get back to being mothers and housewives. And that was even a more difficult transition. They couldn't go to the pub and drink with their mates back then. So I want to acknowledge them. I also want to acknowledge that I'm very, very lucky. My father gave us the opportunity to be strong. Not all of us have that opportunity. And I think that's where the injustice has been, that none of us really have been provided the opportunity by the education, employment, government, health systems, all that. Now the time is ripe for opportunity. If you want to optimize your labor force, if you want to optimize the resources in society, give them the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Thank you so much, buddy. You're an absolute champion, and I always look forward to catching up and having a chat with you.
Cheers, Trevor. Not a worry at all, mate.
If you're a child of a Vietnam veteran, you can join our exclusive family via the link below. Here you'll find kindness, understanding, and hopefully lifelong friendships. Be safe, be well, and please remember, reach out to any professional services listed below should you need them. Our parents went to war, but we endured the fight. See you next time.